Okay, welcome.
Welcome, everybody. So great to see you all here today. Uh, so, Debbie and I'll introduce, I'm Michelle Anderson and Debbie Andrus. We are really happy to see you all here. We have 40 minutes to try and discuss something that I think is really important to us, and that is to become more aware of the tension that we tend to get in our body that causes bad things to happen when we play clarinet. And it happens all the time. It's very, very natural. So, between us, we're going to try and share with you some of our favorite things to notice tension that you might not be aware of, and then exercises to help reprogram yourself so that it doesn't affect you as much. So, with that in mind, feel free to also post questions into the chat, and we'll keep an eye on that as we go here. But whoops, we're going to dive right into this. So, first area that I think a lot of us have tension in that we might not be fully aware of is with our jaw. And the most common place we're going to see that is when you're playing challenging music, right? Challenging music, it's just so instinctive for us to, our body goes, oh, I'm going to do it. And we end up sort of clenching down and, concentrating. And that's kind of a really natural human reaction to what's going on. What happens when we're biting, we're not aware of it, but we are aware of the effects. We get squeaking, we get a really harsh tone. Sometimes we'll be like, I never squeak. Why do I squeak? In this spot, it's this hard spot. And it has all kinds of bad effects. So we have a few exercises here that we're going to use to sort of give you some ideas on how you can identify that tension and then also to mitigate it a little bit. All right, so I have one to share that I'll start with, and then Debbie, why don't you jump in after me? And Debbie, for some reason, I'm not showing up very large on my screen. I don't know if you have
Here,
control over
I
that,
will unpin myself while you are.
or you can spotlight both of us, or uh, whatever is going to
It
work.
only lets me pin. It's very interesting. So maybe just go to speaker view, Michelle.
Yes, although you're recording it, so what you see is what's going to go. So,
Actually, it recorded all by itself. I didn't even push it.
oh, magic. Okay,
I know,
fantastic.
right?
All right. So, here's a fun exercise that can really help you notice jaw tension. If you have your clarinets and if you have a tuner handy, this is fun to try. And I've got my favorite tuning app, which is Tonal Energy, and I love it because it has the smile face on it. And for this exercise, this is going to help us get our jaw very, very open. And one of the things we want to think about is really round embouchure. My colleague Jose Frank Balleste, who is an amazing clarinetist, says if we had blueberries that we stuff between our teeth and our cheeks, it's like we're juicing them. For this exercise, we're still going to take a classical voicing, which means our tongue is going to be really high. Important we keep the tongue high. What I'm going to try and get is a concert F. Most of us are going to get an F sharp, or in this case, I've got it transposed into clarinet tones, so I want a clarinet G. For most of us, when we first play, we're going to get a G sharp. Right? What I'm going to do is open my jaw and try and get it down so that it's really just on our clarinet G. And this is surprisingly tricky for most of us. If you're doing it with your tuner, love to see in the chat what you're getting. For me, I feel like my jaw has to kind of unhinge. And I want to keep my tongue really high. Then what we want to do is to try and take that feeling and just play anything. If you've just been playing a really challenging piece of music, you turn on your tuner, you get that open jaw, and then try and emulate that when you're just playing whatever was just challenging you. I find when I've just done this, whew, it feels like the sound is just coming out super, super freely. Okay, Debbie, speed round, back to
Awesome.
you.
Okay. So, jaw tension, for me, it is biting up, but also kind of biting down. And so one thing that helps with some of my students in sort of freeing up this jaw tension is first to open your mouth and close your mouth and just notice the jaw is right here in front of your ears. That's where it moves. If we can think ah, ee, ah, ee, ah, ee. It's attached to the rest of our head, but this is where it moves. And so then we can play with different shapes with our lips. E, ah, ooh. And for me, my tongue position is exactly what Michelle talked about. It's the E tongue position, but I like to think of my ooh lips. E, ah, ooh. And you can feel that your jaw moves nice and open when you go to ah, not the optimal clarinet sound. So just playing with that and kind of understanding, oh, when I am extra tense, this is squishing up and squeezing my tone. I think Michelle's going to talk about this in a minute. The other thing that helps my students a lot is to play with those shapes when they have their clarinet in their mouth. So I'm going to take an open G. I have my original sound. Oh, better change that. Okay. So I'm going to take an open G and I'm going to play it with an E embouchure, which means I'm going to pull my corners back and I'm going to kind of support my reed with my bottom teeth. And you can hear that the sound kind of stops because I'm kind of too tight with my jaw as well as my lips. So then we can try an ah. So ah, and we'll listen to that open G. And now I'm too low, right? It's kind of a honky, airy sound. So to come back to the middle, I'm going to do ee, ah, ooh. And so I'm going to do the ooh next. So here, tucking my mouthpiece behind my teeth, I'm going to think whoo. And we have a combination of those characteristics to help make our beautiful tone. And so what I'll try to do sometimes is I'll have people actually play it wrong. So I'll have them be too tight on purpose and go to the more relaxed shape, even if it makes the tone bad for a minute. And then try to come back to a moderate place. So I'm going too tight to too loose to kind of a medium place. And then what most people find is, oh, I really need to blow more to make that tone sound good in my more moderate embouchure. And so that's kind of my answer is more air is kind of what's going to make your tone better. So playing with just different shapes to figure out where we want our jaw to be. And as Michelle mentioned, keeping that E tongue position and just changing the front of our lips, E to ooh, and emphasizing that our lips are doing more of the holding on than our teeth can really make a difference. Back to you, Michelle.
All right, thank you. I will make myself bigger again. So
I already made you.
there are so many little exercises that we can do to help with this. I have one that has a visual aid that I thought I will share with you, just because it's kind of fun. So I still have my TE tuner here, and the middle button on the bottom says analysis, and now it's trying to measure my sound. There's so many useful things we can do. If you don't have this app, it's like $5. It's on Android and iOS, and we go into analysis mode. And here's a simple exercise. We're going to take any pitch and start it very softly, grow to loud, and then go soft again. And we're going to try and have it evenly crescendo, evenly diminuendo. What I like about this is in the center, it shows us if we're in tune. And we also have our happy face there. What we tend to do is bite more when we're playing softly because we feel like, oh, I don't have enough air. You know, Debbie just said it's all about air. And the air needs to come from our blowing muscles, not from like squeezing it out. So typically, when most people are doing this, they're going to find they're sharp when they're soft. And then when they play louder, the air blows their tongue down and they go flat. So let me do a typical session. This is what I often look like if I'm not being mindful. So for one thing, you can see I started really loudly, but if we're looking at the fine print, I'm sharp. I was in tune for a brief moment, and then when I was loud, I was very flat, and then I got sharp again. So, it's really hard to be perfectly in tune, but that's what we aspire to. So I want to think about that jaw being down when I start. And my first one wasn't perfect. The second one was better. I'll sit there and just do a series of them. It's an awesome exercise. I highly recommend it. Gives you all kinds of info on what you're doing. Okay, that's it for that one, Debbie.
Okay.
We,
And so shall we move on
I,
to our next? Okay, good.
yeah,
So our next area of tension that can happen a lot is hand tension. And so I'm just going to remove you, Michelle, just so I can be big and beefy here. I loved the exercises that Aileen did with us, and I think that this fine motor work that we do as clarinetists, that can really, we can really have a lot of tension. And of course, what Michelle said at the beginning, when we're trying really hard to make something faster or better, or it's just very technical, that is where I think a lot of people struggle. So a couple things that I do is I try to have relaxed hands. So I'll swing my hand along here and I'll kind of catch my arm, and I'm talking right hand at the moment. I'll catch it with my opposite hand, and then I'll move my fingers and notice when I have my wrist like this, what that feels like. When I have my wrist like this, what does that feel like? And the thing we want to remember is that the tendons for our hands, you can see some on me, they actually attach at our elbow. So we don't just want our hand to be free, we want our whole arm to be free. So one little example that helps kind of bring this to my students with their right hands is, if you do have a cell phone, which we were just using for the TE toner here, pick it up and just hold it, and notice that your thumb opposes your fingers. This is normal when you're picking up something. I could pick up this box of crackers. My thumb is opposite of my fingers. When we play the clarinet with our right hand, our thumb needs to do one job and our fingers need to do another. So I like to think about hand position that way. And you could take your clarinet and you can rest it on your left shoulder, and you can see, is my thumb opposing my fingers? Am I grabbing the clarinet with the top, my thumb and my fingers? Or am I holding the thumb rest with my thumb and allowing my fingers to do the opposite thing, which is to move? So how I think about that is, I think about if I was pretending to shake hands with somebody and my thumb would be facing slightly upwards, it would not be opposing my fingers. So finding that place, taking the side of my thumbnail, sliding it up the back of the clarinet until my thumb hits the register key, not register key, but thumb rest, and then letting my fingers fall relaxed and naturally over the tone holes. It's going to take a different, everybody's wrist and arm is different, but starting from a place of relaxation and easy movement is one of the key things that I think to help hand tension. My right hand is probably my more challenging hand, and so that's where I really try to think about this. I don't want to oppose my fingers, but I want to be doing one job with my thumb, and then my fingers can be relaxed, and that movement can go down my entire arm. If you see, if I'm kind of twiddling I don't even know what this is called, but when I'm just gently moving my fingers, that is really optimal for my right hand. I'll turn it over to you, Michelle, and then I'll go back to the left hand in a minute.
fantastic. So, just on what Debbie just said, I'm a huge fan when I'm working on a piece of music of really isolating the different components of it. There's articulation, there's rhythm, fingering being a big part of it. And when it feels challenging, I see this in my own playing and certainly in my students. we hit that hard bit, we tend to start slamming our fingers really hard, which would be very different from what Debbie was just modeling. So one of the things I like to do is put my clarinet, near my face, but not in my mouth, and I just finger a short bit of the passage that's giving me trouble. Maybe it's 2 beats, and I just look at my fingers, and what I'm trying, and I'll sometimes sing it. So there I am using my jazz voice, inspired by Jay earlier this morning. But what I want to try and do is have my body and brain feel at ease. So I'm sort of saying to my brain, oh, this is easy, to help kind of contradict that smash, smash, smash that I might otherwise be doing. There's another tool, though, that really helps me. Most of us tend to get our fingers on the way down to the hole about a 1/4 inch or a centimeter away, and then we go smack. And that smack actually will bump the music. If I'm playing a slow, beautiful piece and my air is smooth, but I'm smacking my fingers, you're going to perceive it as an accent. My air was really smooth, but you could hear each note smashing. So I have a wonderful homemade device here that I highly recommend you make. I took a bunch of rubber bands and I just looped them together, and they're clipped onto my music stand. This is my finger bungee cord. And what it does is if I loop a finger in there, it gives me a little bit of resistance as this finger's coming down. These are not muscle building exercises. Don't make this so hard you can barely move, but just that little bit trains that finger to slow down. So I'll just take one interval. And I found that was a really smooth interval. And frankly, that was probably a little slower than I would normally come down. So this is a good exercise for me to put back into my routine. Sometimes you can have a couple loops, do 3 fingers at once. You can try and get 2 fingers in there. Really simple way to get us there. And also when we lift up, we don't want to pop them up. I use the example of we're squishing marshmallows on the way down, so it slows down, and then they melted, so when we lift up, they're a little sticky. We kind of have to lift slowly, and that gives us a clean set of fingerings. Okay, Debbie, why don't you go back to your other hand?
Alrighty. And so the other thing I wanted to say about both hands, regardless, is where do your fingers move from? And I think that marshmallow example, Michelle, is so perfect because I think of squishing the air in and letting the air blow my finger off. I think, but that having that resistance and playing with a rubber band is such a great idea. So the other thing we want to know is where do our fingers move from? And most people, if you asked somebody to point to their knuckles, we could point to these ones, right? We could point to there, and then we have a second pair of knuckles, and then we have a third pair of knuckles here. Move your fingers in just a relaxed way, whether it's, doing this or just opening and closing. Look on the inside and notice where your fingers move from. It's kind of like the jaw and being aware of where does that open and close. The head doesn't open and close, just the jaw does. So with our fingers, it looks like our knuckles are way up here, but actually the movement is coming from inside your hand. And so thinking about that and just sort of like playing with that, I love that idea of playing. And then the other thing you can do is the same thing. You could bring your wrists more straight. You could bend them over and notice, oh, that's kind of difficult. And then you could bend them too far this way, and then it becomes difficult in another way. So just being aware of where your body is moving and where it's moving from is really helpful. Left hand, what I like to think about is, and Al talked a little bit about this, he likes to have his thumb pointing in the 1 o'clock direction, so that the tip of his thumb is touching that register key, and the fleshy part of the thumb is covering the register key. A lot of people will be down here because they've been learning Shalumo for a long time, and then all of a sudden they have to learn Clarinet, and they're like, wait, now what? I have to put my finger up here. So having that already touching is really helpful. That's how I set up my thumb, and I set up my thumb first, and then I use my left shoulder again, and I just allow those fingers to kind of come down on here, and then I do the same thing I did before, whereas I'm just noticing where is my finger moving from? And what a lot of people will find, I better move this down a little bit, is that your wrist can either help you or hinder you in tension. So having your wrist too far away can make reaching your lever keys really difficult. And a straight finger is kind of an indication of that. Squeaking is also an indication of that. But then my wrist, you can see, is very straight and pulled away from the clarinet. Now I can drop it a little and see how that feels from my lever keys. And then I can put it too far under, and then it gets hard to cover the tone holes on the top. So just playing a little bit with how far out do I want my wrist? How far in do I want my wrist? And can I do all the things that I'm required to do? And what Michelle said earlier about just playing, if there's one key in particular that is hindering you, if your wrist is too far from the B key, for example, whoops, I think someone,
Sorry.
oh, Carol, that was you.
Sorry.
You can find a new place and then pry it. How does it feel there versus and so just playing around with not just where your fingers are, but where your wrists and your arms are can really make a difference in your awareness of tension. Back to you, Michelle.
Thank you. So, one last thing I just thought of as Debbie was talking about hand tension. It's really great to video record yourself when you practice and know that you're going to listen and go, oh, that's horrible. That's horrible. Like, we tend to be very critical as musicians, but if you use it productively to just get feedback on what you're doing and then say, I'm going to fix one thing, then you record it again. Okay, I'm going to fix the next thing. But what Debbie was just saying about alignment of hands is so important, because some of us play with our elbows really far out, and that's putting our wrist into this bent position that causes stress on the tendons, injuries. And so usually we want our elbows relaxed and in. Also, look at a video for full body tension. We all have weird quirks, but often when it's hard, you'll see your shoulders go up, and you can just hear what that's doing to my voice, which would be affecting my clarinet playing. So video gives us a little bit of sense of that. There's a device I thought of just related to fingers before we move on from fingers. If your fingers like to fly, then it's much harder to get down and cover the holes and you get those slapping. There's an Australian clarinetist who invented this device called classical fingers, and I don't have it fully hooked up. It magnetically straps onto your clarinet. He gives you these little rubber bands, and it's like a fingering shield. And so I'll just hold it. So when I'm playing, if my fingers hit the shield, it's really good feedback that I know I'm moving my fingers. And a lot of my students really like this. It's just at classicalfingers.com. I'm not affiliated with them. I just think it's a cool product. So back to this full body tension. I think we really need to notice where we hold tension and how it affects us. So we've talked about jaw, which you'll hear. If you're squeaking, it usually means either your fingers have not come down on a hole. So you might say, well, was I doing a lot of really odd fingering things? But if not, that's usually a jaw thing. So we've covered that a bit. But sometimes just to relax your jaw is hard. What's tangible is get your whole body just kind of relaxed. A lot of the stuff Aileen was just doing with us is super helpful. A lot of times we've worked on a hard passage, practiced it like a million times, then we go back to the beginning of a piece and we get there and it screws up again. So frustrating, right? In this case, I feel like it's our brain that's stressed and we've programmed some bad habits. We have to think of the unconscious part of our brain that does a lot of things on autopilot for us as, on one hand, our greatest gift with clarinet playing. Once I learn a finger pattern or a rhythm pattern, I don't have to think about it. It feels automatic. But sadly, bad habits get thrown in there too. And so we have to coach this part of our brain to retrain it, like we're training a dog or a very young child. And one of the things we have to convince it is that something is easy, when in the past it's been looking at this going, red alert, challenging, root, root, root. So an interesting and really effective exercise is to take a passage that's hard And I'm standing right now. It's great to do standing, but you can do it when you're sitting. As I practice it, I'm going to do this weird slow motion like I'm a weed underwater. What this does, if I'm doing this, I'm subconsciously saying, I am so relaxed right now. Life is so easy. It actually tones down that panic part of our brain. So part of our brain sees the music, goes red alert, our body reacts by getting tense, but it works the other way. If my body's relaxed, it helps calm down the red alert. So it feels strange, but you can do this in the privacy of your own home. If you're working on that hard thing, oh, I think I was a little tense there. Okay, I'm going to try it while I'm just like totally relaxed. And all of a sudden, instantly, my air came out more easily. Now, you might want to do it slowly, but the idea is it's one more tool to help release the panic. So I'm going to throw it back to you, Debbie.
All right. And so I'm going to basically piggyback on that. Um, some of you know that I had a brain injury for almost 5 years ago now. And I actually had to get my playing back little by little, 1 minute at a time. And so I really had to address tension in my brain because that's where it mostly came in because I was so frustrated because I couldn't do what I used to be able to do. And so I actually had to learn a lot of exercises and mindfulness, kind of along the lines of what Aileen was talking about. And in a rehearsal, I had to calm myself down before I was about to do something difficult. As I was progressing, I was going to rehearsals and my brain would literally get overloaded and not be able to handle it. So one of the things that I do, and I actually do it regularly now, is I breathe in and bring my shoulders up and then I sigh it out. And I do it again, maybe a little slower, and I do it through my nose. And then, and if I can't be that obvious, so let's say if it's a concert, I will do something called square breathing. And what this does is it resets your brain, just like Michelle was talking about. And I will do square breathing, which means I breathe in for a certain number, I hold my breath, and I consciously relax my body for a certain number. I breathe out for a certain number, hold my breath, and relax my body again and breathe in. And by doing that for 3 cycles, for me, that's just what ended up happening. So when I'm in a concert and I just need to be sitting still, right? I can't be moving my shoulders around or any of that. I will just breathe out first, 3, 4. I'll hold and consciously relax my shoulders, my neck. And then I'll breathe in. 3, 4. I'll hold it, relax my shoulders, relax my neck, relax my hands. I might drop my hands off here and just let them fall. And I do that 3 times. And even sometimes I'll do it with my clarinet, right? So if I have like 10 rests, let's say, I'll take my rests and I'll breathe out for 4, in for 4, hold for 4, the same circular breathing. But what that does is it gets me back into a parasympathetic state so that I can then do my job of playing the clarinet. And, you can focus on different parts of your body, whatever you're feeling tension. If you're feeling tension in your neck, you can, consciously, so doing that breathing exercise in the tense situation makes a big difference. The other thing that I have found really helpful for arms and shoulders is when I'm doing that, I might twist my hand backwards. I've just let my shoulder go, hold it, and release it. So I kind of coordinate my breath by adding a little bit of a stretch and then letting that stretch go. So those are some of the techniques that I use to get my brain back into that parasympathetic state so it can do its job. Back to you, Michelle.
It's kind of fun doing the handoff here. All right, there's one other technique I'd really love to share with you because it has been so helpful to me. And some of these things we've talked about can be almost instant fixes. This one I had to work on for about 3 weeks before it really started working, and I'm so glad I did. So I'm going to share it with you. You've Most of us have had an experience where we have a performance where we're nervous. It's usually a public performance, we're playing in front of others, there's some stake in it, and weird things go wrong that usually don't go wrong. So it's totally normal to feel nervous and then to have things happen. Our heart pounds faster, so we use up oxygen faster, and then we can't breathe in our normal breathing spots. Or some people get really sweaty hands or really cold hands. You recognize what the symptoms are in yourself. And then sometimes something goes wrong, and then we go, I can't believe I made that mistake. I never make that mistake. And then while I'm thinking that, I miss the next bar, right? And then, whoo, it's this spiral. So it's common. Like, we've had this, and I've really been working hard on techniques to help survive that stress and those mistakes and to recover quickly. And this is one that I discovered not in the musical world, but it totally helped me in my musical world. And what I call it is having a relaxation cue. And this is where you're literally going to program your body and brain to be able to relax with one, like the equivalent of a snap of a finger. So we go back to, if you've heard of Pavlov's dog, it's where this Russian psychologist would ring a bell and then put the bowl of food in front of the dog. And he did that every day for a few weeks. It takes a few weeks to condition ourselves. And then it got to where he'd ring the bell and the dog would start drooling because the dog was programmed to expect good food to be given to him at that moment. So what I do is, when I'm practicing a piece and I hit a spot where it's going really well, sometimes you have that moment where, oh, this is how I want it to be. It feels like I'm relaxed. I like my tone. I like what my fingers are doing. I'll play that short passage. If I can, I'll close my eyes and I try and tune into, what does this feel like right now? And, physically, mentally, emotionally, what am I doing? And then I think of a physical movement that attached to it. So here's my personal one. My elbows come out and they hit my body gently, and I hear this massive gong or timpani going boom. That's my ringing the bell. So I get myself to where it's exactly how I want. I play, I go boom. And I'm trying to associate in my brain that this is what I feel like when everything's going well, I'm relaxed, the music is going great. And you need to start by first getting yourself where you feel really good, but even if it's just playing a slow scale, most of us can make that feel really good. We start that conditioning. This happened to me not long ago. I was performing at a university as a guest artist, and somehow in the middle of the piece, I knocked my reed slightly astray. And it's a Brahms sonata. And I put it in my mouth, and it feels like hardly any sound is coming out. And I just panicked. And I didn't want to stop in the middle of a phrase. I knew there was a rest coming up in 2 lines. So I'm like, okay. I started panicking, and then I just went boom. And the music started flowing. It still felt hard. Boom, I did it again. And then I got to my rest. I sorted it out, and all was good. But it was really disconcerting, and it reminded me of the power of this. So that took a while to explain. It is so worth conditioning yourself to have a relaxation cue. I have some students who do it with their toes tapping. They all have different sounds. I have one student who, she just kind of like shifts her body a little bit to the side. Whatever it is, you create a cue that's comfortable for you. But I think that's an important one to experiment with.
Wow. I love that, Michelle. That is something I really want to play with now. I'm excited for that. We are almost out of time. So I think we had two questions. One is from Carol. Can you comment on how to actually notice tension before it gets the best of us?
Thoughts, Debbie?
Carol, you asked us a hard question.
I
Um, I think awareness for sure and playing with it. And one thing I would say, I sometimes make my students or myself purposely play with tension in one area or another so that I can help them to understand what it feels like when they let it go. So I don't know if that answers it, but if I notice tension in someone else, I'm like, well, why don't you try it this way, then this way, then this way? Kind of like the way I did it with the E, the ah, and the ooh, is try it in many different ways to see if you can find it. What do you think, Michelle?
I totally agree with that. And I would also say sometimes we're not smart enough in the moment to have the awareness of the tension, but we hear the symptoms of it. So if you're squeaking, almost always that means take your jaw and correct by rounding it down. If your fingers are being really clumsy, odds are you started smacking it and try and rein them in and make them more gentle. And again, this is where regularly doing a video of yourself will help you see the things that we're not aware of in the time, tension and all the other things that happen. But I would recommend record yourself more often.
Yeah. So, and then JS said tension in the trapezius muscle, upper mid back, everything else is fine. So, my husband and I call that the clarinet, and I go and get massages regularly to work on the clarinet. But something that can help is if you might be raising your shoulder ever so slightly while you're holding the clarinet. So, a couple modifications that I do. I'm a double lipped player, so I actually use my knees all the time. And that actually has helped my clarinet not be as dramatic. Other people find that neck straps help. I think, Michelle, you wear a neck strap regularly, yes?
Yep, I do.
And do you have a clarinet?
Uh, if I'm not being mindful, I definitely get that clarinet. It's improved so much since I started doing some of those relaxation things as I play. But it is a good reminder if your right hand gets sore, your wrist gets sore, you don't want to mess around. Neck straps are great. Some people like the spongy ones, like elastic ones, if you move a lot. I do. I find people who don't move a lot prefer a fixed cord. And there's also all kinds of thumb rest adjustments you can get. Tom Kooman, Kooiman, makes these great ones that support the weight all over your hand, and they're worth looking at if you have hand issues, just worth mentioning.
Yeah. Does anyone else have a question for us about tension, about anything we addressed? Because we have 2 minutes, so unmute yourself if you have a question, please.
Debbie, you had a throat tension exercise that we didn't cover
Oh,
with
let
a
me double
mirror.
check. Oh, yes, I did. Thank you. I did forget about that one. Okay, so throat tension. What I like to use is you can use a mirror or you can just pretend your hand is a mirror. And we can fog up a mirror, right, with nice slow air. And if you do that, you can feel how open your throat might be. And some people will play like that. That's how I like to breathe in with my mouth in a nice ah shaped, because that allows air in. A lot of times, because we play with a high tongue and we play with very focused airstream, a more of an E or a cool airstream, people will close their throat and get this glottal stop. Ha, and then they will try to breathe in that way. So if you have a lot of noise when you breathe in, most likely you are probably closing your throat. And so doing some exercises thinking, and going from a very open throat to our focused airstream can be really helpful in making sure that the air just comes in and goes right back out again without any kind of a control. So that's one thing to just sort of find your throat tension. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah. Okay. In our speed,
Oh,
go ahead, Emily.
apropos of that, Debbie, when you're running out of breath and you feel like you're going to flop, how do you do that gracefully?
Oh, do you have more notes to play or are you able to sort of take a rest?
No, no, you've got to keep on going.
So I actually practice breathing out before I breathe in. What David was talking about in the warm up, I do that before every entrance so that I'm starting with fresh breath. And then I always try to find, if I have a long passage, find a place to breathe out before I breathe in again. So I might have to play like 5 notes and then breathe in again. But I always want to allow myself to have a full and relaxed breath, Emily. That's what I do. Michelle?
Michelle, I think you said once how to get out of breath as though nobody knew it.
Yes. Oh, they're going to send us back. Oh, we got 60
Yeah.
seconds. So
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. The other thing too, Emily, just to be aware of, related to breath, is that sometimes when we start to feel out of breath, we panic. Our brain says breathe, and we breathe in without blowing out, as Debbie said, and then our lungs are half full of stale air. It's really important that when we feel like we need a breath, we make sure our lungs are almost empty, so that when we do take a nice deep breath, it's really oxygen rich. But when you start to see people like breathing every 5 seconds, it's usually that their lungs
Yeah.
are full of stale air. So just to be
Yeah, and that's my
time your breath.
Pavlovian trick to calm myself down is to breathe out before I breathe in. And I do it in every warm up and almost every entrance.
Thank you, everybody. We'll
Thanks,
head back to the
everybody.
main room. This was awesome. Appreciate you all being here.
Yeah.